then for the Obama administration officials, former Obama administration officials coming out and saying that we need to get ready for an invasion, that this is about to happen. So what is the truth here? And it's all very convenient, the timing of this, given the midterm elections in the United States just after the midterm elections. Joining us now is Colonel Douglas Macgregor, and we wanted to get your assessment on this. Colonel, great to have you back on the show.
Fine, thanks. Happy to be here.
So let's talk about your assessment of this. I mean, we've been talking that the real story, of course, is China and what happens with Taiwan. We've been talking about that all summer. And are we at an inflection moment right now where this could get even hotter than we thought possible in this calendar year?
Well, the quick answer is no. And I spent a lot of time looking at it over the last 24 hours. And I don't know what makes the current set of conditions any more imminent than they were 6 months ago or even 6 years ago. When I look at it from a purely military standpoint, the upgrades, if you want to call them that, in terms of modernization applied to airfields and missile forces, those are real, but those upgrades are not spectacular. They're simply designed to make the airfields more defensible, to place more aircraft in the vicinity if required. They're retiring a lot of old aircraft and rolling in new variants on fighters and fighter bombers. Those things are happening. Of course, their missile force is overwhelmingly theater and tactical ballistic missiles as opposed to intercontinental ballistic missiles, because the threat they see is really from the sea and largely from the U.S. Navy. But I don't see a concentration of force that would indicate anything happening quickly. That would take us a long time to assemble, frankly. The forces are not sitting around waiting to invade. They're still spread out to a number of different areas. So no, I don't see anything imminent, and I'm not sure what they're referring to or what they see, because I don't see it.
So specifically, and you're talking about the Chinese mounting forces. Yes, the Chinese mounting.
Mainland China.
Yeah. So it's strange to me then, right? I mean, this is why I wanted to have you on, because the president of Taiwan says this is imminent. You have former Obama administration officials coming out saying this is imminent. Of course, you saw David Petraeus, of course, being trucked out over the past couple of weeks as well on this. So why now? I mean, I know you're not a politician, but what's your sense of, like, why are we hearing all of this rhetoric right now?
Well, I might also add that I recently listened to John Bolton come out and describe China as the great existential threat of our era. And I wasn't present for his statement, but if I had been there, I would have said, well, what happened to the global caliphate? I thought the global caliphate was the existential threat of our era. What, did it go away? I think a lot of this is grossly exaggerated. The president of Taiwan is in trouble politically. There are two parties that are meaningful and powerful that govern Taiwan from time to time. One is the KMT, and the other is the Democratic Progressive Party, which is led by the current president. The DPP, which is the current party in power, has always been very pro-Japanese. People need to understand that Taiwan, here that this is not hostile. We scramble aircrafts packaging so that it can be
Ukrainian milk. It's not tied to silver. It's not tied to real estate. What it's tied to is debt. So America is a debt. 0 to 24 years old. 0 to 24 years old. Astonishing. Look at that chart. I mean, about the fact that they want these tangible assets, like actual, I'm talking real estate, gold, silver, tangible assets. They won't talk about it because it would go against the idea of their currency. They are actually actively trying to buy up as much of this as they can right now, quietly. So it's happening, guys.
Well, and they also don't want to say it because if they say it, then the public's going to go buy it. You know what I mean? So they want to keep it quiet so that we don't go invest in a bunch of gold.
Yeah, and they don't want you to own homes anymore. I mean, this is the thing. This is what the globalists don't want. They want you to literally be a part of their, like vassal state. They control everything. They don't want you to own land. They don't want you to own property. They don't want you to own things. Remember, don't own anything and you'll be happy. That's the goal of the Great Reset. That's absolutely what they want. And you can see it. It's not a conspiracy theory. They say it. It's printed, and they're already doing it. So, at what point do you get rolled over? It's almost like, did you ever read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? And
Oh yeah, I love the movie. I never read the book.
well, the book is like, they're just sitting there around having beers, like they can't believe that really they're about to literally destroy the Earth, and they're just like, and they don't believe it. They see the spaceships there. They're like, you've got 15 minutes until we destroy everything. Like, really? Nah, come on, that's not. Let's go to the pub. You want to go to the pub? They don't believe it. They don't believe it. Anyway, we got more news to get to here. Let's talk about these excess deaths. So why are so many people dying this year when you compare it with last year? Now, I say something is worth investigating, wouldn't you? Like, how many of you actually think that we should start looking into this more deeply? I do. A few weeks ago, we brought you the data. The data is absolutely troubling on the significant rise in excess deaths in the UK and the stunning data in the United States. Now, the data shows that young people are dying at an alarming rate. Many of these people are from the age of 0 to 24 years old. So that's an awful number, right? We can see people, okay, over 66 years old, over 65 years old. I get it, right? Maybe there's seasonal adjustments and but 0 to 24 years old? What the hell's happening here? A few weeks ago we saw this. This is towards the end of September. We showed you this chart. Now, this is from the CDC. Okay, this is the CDC's own website. And in red X's at the top there, what you can see are these are all excess. All of the areas where there's like little plus signs, above that red line that looks like a wave, okay, all of those above that are excess. Abnormal. Abnormal, and it's growing. Now, if you look at the current trajectory of excess deaths in the United States, take a look at this. Now, we'll get to the UK in a second, but look at the current excess deaths. This is from this afternoon, okay? This is the CDC's own website data. So just look here as we track up. You can see as we continue to go up this steep hill, climbing, and continuing to grow. Excess deaths the week of, this ending last week, okay, the 43rd week. Look at that, astonishing. And the cumulative excess deaths in the United States from 0 to 64 years old. From 0 to 64 years old, okay? Now, if we scroll down a little bit more, you'll see from, that's 65 plus right there, okay, that's a little bit higher. But then look at this, 0 to 24 years old. 0 to 24 years old. Astonishing. Look at that chart. I mean, it's not hard to, you sort of sit there with your, when I look at, like, my mouth's open when I'm looking at these data points,
And that's the thing,
it's
it's
a
like,
ski slope.
and we expect our mainstream media to like, why aren't they going through these numbers? Why is this not, I just cannot comprehend why these people live in our society, they have kids, they have friends of their kids, like, why are they not concerned with these numbers and talking about this on mainstream media? Like,
Look at that shit.
we could potentially, I don't think we will now because I think the narrative is starting to open up a little bit and YouTube's getting more lax on their rules, but at one point, if we talked about this very thing, we would be suspended.
And I spent this afternoon because I had a lot of data points that I wanted to hit on. So I'm sitting there. Look, YouTube provides us with the largest possible audience. I mean, hopefully, you watching right now, I mean, we've got upwards of 30,000 people on all of our platforms combined watching right now. I mean, think about that. Like, Coldplay is putting on a concert in London, and the crowd size is 20,000, right? So there are more people watching our show right now than at a Coldplay concert. This Christmas concert coming up in London. That's crazy. And so we have a large audience on YouTube. And when I go through the terms of service and I'm looking at, okay, what are we allowed to say? Because I love Rumble and all of our Rumble watchers as well. But we are able to reach so many more people to spread this news. It's, sad but true, right? And so we've been totally deplatformed on Facebook. We've been blocked and banned and shadow banned. We can't, anything we publish on there is like no views at all. 0, because they block it. So I have to go through the terms of service on YouTube to find out what specifically are we even allowed to talk about. Now they've adjusted their COVID guidelines. They've kind of flip-flopped on where they were last year, which we covered here on the show. And then, of course, we've now things have changed so much that we have to kind of check it on a weekly basis almost, you know? We have to like go in and see, okay, did they change this now? Can we talk about, what can we say on the vaccines? What can we say about booster shots? It's ridiculous. And I think some of this stuff is
that's become like one of my favorite hobbies. It's just that my weekly, okay, what are the rules on YouTube this week? So, yeah.
Yeah, I know, it's kind of crazy. And then, you know, what's amazing is if you look at the election stuff, it's a sideball issue or a rabbit hole issue. But just looking at the election stuff, right, what you're allowed to talk about. Now they've just updated them this week. You can't even talk about the Brazilian election that just happened last week. Like, they're all over that already. They've literally got that in there. They've got the German election. I mean, don't ask questions. Don't ask questions. So what we try to do here is provide you with the data. You make your own assessment. This is coming right from the CDC's website. Okay, these are not my opinion. These are not my data points. These are the CDC's guidelines and website data. Okay, so look at this. This is the state-by-state breakdown of this data. Just to be clear, YouTube, this is the CDC's data. So this is the cumulative, just general average, okay, of increased excess deaths. And here, that's 6%. That's a 6% here at the top. Okay, now it goes state by state. So as we scroll down here, this is the excess deaths in Alabama. That's, and look at these, 24% in Arizona increase. 13%.
Jeez.
Arkansas, excess deaths, or 7% as of last week. Look at this one. 14% in California. And then you get some weird ones like in Colorado down 7%. Connecticut down. So then that weights the average down. So when with the beginning we showed you that 6%. But then look at these increases all across these states. Delaware, massive increases, right? The District of Columbia, oddly, really down for some reason this past week. And then Florida up. All of these states up. And in the UK. So let's talk about the UK. A stunning bit of news, a new data since we last reported this. Here's the Telegraph. This Telegraph story is really eye-opening. You should all read it. It's unfortunately it's a subscription service. You know, I hate that I have to pay for some of these big publications like this, but I do because sometimes we feature them here on the show, and it's important for us to do it, and I pay for it, so you don't have to. So I'll kind of go through what this Telegraph story says. Rising non-COVID excess deaths reveal the disastrous legacy of the pandemic. It says, when Britain first locked down in March 23, 2020, the average daily death rate from COVID was around 213, triggering understandable alarm and the ushering in of strict restrictions. Now, a similar number of unexpected deaths are occurring each day, the majority of which are not primarily caused by coronavirus. Now, I'm quoting this Telegraph piece. These are not my words. Yet there is largely silence from the government and health service, it says. Data from the Office of National Statistics, ONS, shows that in the past 6 months there have been more excess deaths from causes other than COVID than deaths due to coronavirus for the entire year. So what is it then? Wouldn't you like to know?
Well, in that first sentence too, like it's saying, Philip, if you can pull that document back up, so I can read that first sentence.
Now a similar.
It says.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, the first one where it says the average daily death rate from COVID was around 213. Now we don't know. They're saying from COVID, but we've shown with the Freedom of Information Act that it was with COVID. So I wonder if that number is the accurate number of from or with.
With. Yeah, this is the question, right? So the report goes on data from the Office of National Statistics, the ONS, shows that in the past 6 months there have been more excess deaths from causes other than COVID than deaths due to coronavirus for the entire year. Figures reveal there were 18,394 deaths due to COVID recorded this year in England and Wales. But since May, there have been 23,195 excess deaths where the primary cause was another condition. Some of those people did die with a coronavirus infection, but it was not the main reason for the death. Unbelievable. The excess deaths in the UK. Take a look at this latest data. Now, the Daily Skeptic has this put together, and these all in here in red that Will Jones has highlighted from the Daily Skeptic shows. I don't know if we have that chart, do we, or is it all just on my laptop here? Let me take this on my screen here, Philip. Sorry. So this excess deaths in red. These are the most recent few from the end from the beginning of this year. These are the 5-year averages for the weeks 1 to 8 in 2022 are affected by the COVID-19 wave in early 2021, right? So that was the COVID wave right there in early 2021. So what the hell is this in red? Can anyone answer me? So COVID wave came, everyone went and did something, governments mandated people to do stuff. You know what I'm talking
Can
about.
we ask the question about whether or not that's correlated with the the J?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm implying here, right? I'm not saying it is, and I'm not saying there's a correlation, but the Daily Skeptic is saying there's a correlation based on some of this data, and wouldn't we like to know if there is? And this is why there should be an investigation. A new report out today from the Daily Skeptic goes into that specific data I was just showing you. Says the death crisis continues with 1,232 excess deaths, 12% above the 5-year average registered in England and Wales in the week ending October 28th, according to the ONS. Of these, 804 of them were attributed to an underlying cause other than COVID-19, bringing the total excess non-COVID deaths since the wave began in April to 23,000, compared to the 1,200 last time. 23,000 to 1,200. So here's the most stunning data. An average of 1,564 extra deaths per week. Throughout 2020, that number was 315. Throughout 2021, that number was 1,322. Now, since May of 2022, since May of this year, 24,440 non-COVID deaths. Nobody who's in charge of the NHS or any of the health, the health secretaries are talking about this at all. I don't hear anybody at the CDC talking about this.
Where are the government, alarmists right now? Like, if it was some, the virus, they're like totally alarmed. But like these numbers are. That's why I was always like, it's such a farce, because there's no alarm about heart disease. There's no alarm about alcohol-induced deaths. Like, they don't care actually about the deaths because it's not. They can't make it alarming.
Yeah.
So the fact that nobody is out here yelling about this is laughable.
And the line that we've been hearing from like the BBC and others is that there's a backlog of people that couldn't get health care, right? So there's of course you're going to see additional problems right now, and perhaps maybe, but at what point does that line or that narrative start to not actually hold up anymore? And I think we're starting to see the line right now. I think we're starting to see the cracks in that story. Especially when you have, and again, when you look at the heart-related deaths, that's the big one. So I get the cancer piece of this, right? I get that. But in 0 to 24-year-olds, what? Can someone explain that to me? No, you can't. So why don't we have a massive investigation? Why don't we have full transparency on this? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because the biopharmaceutical complex doesn't want us to. This story out today. Slap in the face from Pfizer. Pfizer chief, this was on an earnings call to investors, says the Pfizer chief, Borrella, says that COVID will continue to be a multi-billion-dollar franchise for Pfizer for many years to come, he says. As the firm prepares to
They refer to it as a franchise.
Yeah.
Think about that. They're calling that a franchise like it's some kind of like money maker. And they,
like a McDonald's.
So whether you believe like the data or whatever, but the fact that via the information they put out, a lot of people died. and they're calling it a franchise like it's a celebratory thing, like we are going to still make billions. And a lot of people don't realize that 9 new billionaires were created in the pharmaceutical industry during this pandemic, and they have made record profits at this time. So it's been 100% about the money, and the fact that they call it, that's just like that stuff infuriates me.
Yeah, and so they're going to mark this up 10,000% markup on vaccines. 10,000%. Money's good. Price hike is great. Price hike is a result of dwindling government funds for vaccine doses, they say. Oh, because the government's now, so now we just need to jack up the price. The uninsured population will be on the hook for the out-of-pocket costs of the shots. Pfizer has earned about $80 billion on vaccines and the antiviral drug Paxlovid.
Well, and now that they're going to mandate it, potentially, I don't know if that's moved forward, but mandate it potentially for kids going into school, who's paying for that? Are the parents, are the schools boards paying for that? Like when kids have to do that, it's generally on the parents, right?
I suppose.
And their insurance?
I think it'll come through the insurance, exactly. Yeah. The company projects $102 billion in total revenue this year, while with the vaccine and its antiviral Paxlovid, more than double the company's revenue in 2019. So again, if you think they cost, according to the Daily Mail, experts have estimated that Pfizer's vaccine cost just $1.18 per dose to make. So charging $130 per dose would represent a markup of more than 10,000%, according to the Daily Mail. And of course, this idea of the no cost to Americans, that vaccines costing nothing for Americans, that's about to run out. So all of this will then move towards the insurance companies. Hey, they think that's great.
Right?
Right.
For what?
The dinner. Well, Mom, it's waterproof. Like when I'm in the shower, I'm able to, shave my sideburns, do some other things, make sure that everything is trimmed up nice.
But by Pierre Omidyar, who's a founder and the funder of the...
But first, I want to get your reports on this. Get your thoughts on this new report out today about the Biden administration looking to monitor over 200,000 sources of data. Does this surprise you at all?
No, it doesn't, Clayton. A little bit of background. I went through the data miner, which is a tool that they're going to be using. It's a licensing deal for I think about 30 different licenses. What's fascinating about this is, I have a sort of an intimate experience in this from the science and technology standpoint. Back in 1993, when I was doing my PhD in what's called
This
AI
is why I'm being
analysis,
followed.
I actually
No matter
wrote
what kind of
contests to
crap they bring
automatically
up, listen to this
analyze
guy.
and route and categorize email. And it was a contest that was sponsored by the Executive Office of the President when Clinton was there. And the government at that time, there's some legitimate uses because you want to use it against foreign adversaries for threats to the president, right, etc. So I ended up winning that contest, and my technology won, and I ended up creating a for-profit company in the field of customer service. So if you send an email, for example, to American Express, our technology would figure out and route it to the right people. Now, the government was more interested in using that, at the surface level that was put out for monitoring threats to the president, threats to U.S. citizens. Now, technologies like data miner, and in fact what I built back then, could easily be used for monitoring on U.S. citizens. And this is what the issue is. Obviously, governments want to protect their borders and their citizens from foreign adversaries. But the reality is technologies like this are being used against U.S. citizens. In fact, there's a whole technology infrastructure. And that's what we discovered back in 2020, which is not just any one player or just one technology, Clayton. It's an entire system of technologies, a network of operations involving academia. It involves the government, and essentially private companies where you can launder censorship. But tools like data miner have been around for a long time. When I was at MIT in 1981, when I came as an undergraduate, the entire third floor of the MIT Computer Science Lab, everyone knew was run by the NSA. So we have to understand that every 4 or 5 years, the news will put out stuff like this, little piecemeal pieces. And I think we need to get a little bit smarter as a public to recognize that the technology which was potentially used, like data miner, which they say was used by the Air Force in that article, right?
Right.
For what foreign adversaries, now is being pointed at U.S. citizens through this domestic censorship infrastructure that we discovered in 2020, which allows government at this layer using a non-profit NGOs to launder censorship. And that NGO infrastructure was funded not only by DHS, but by Pierre Omidyar, who's a founder and the funder of The Intercept.
So when the Department of Homeland Security comes out on 9/11, and you have Mayorkas saying, we're not so much focused on foreign adversaries anymore. Now the real threat is at home. He's just representing a small piece of this. So your research has uncovered that is really the DHS piece of this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh yeah, I mean, to just talk about DHS leaks in many ways is a subterfuge. It is a misdirection. One of the things that occurred, Clayton, from what we spoke about last time, is what was racking my brain was here in 2020, we had figured out not just the tip of the iceberg, but the entire iceberg. That entire network diagram, which includes multiple layers, government, academic organizations, who created many, many different systems architecture playbooks, which is right on that diagram at winbackfreedom.com. Those architectural diagrams, when we put them all together, out of that emerged this domestic censorship infrastructure network diagram. We call it the government and big tech infrastructure diagram, which is out there, which has been out there for 2 years. And when you look at that diagram, the basis of our lawsuit was that we had discovered that government over here is not supposed to monitor U.S. citizens. It's a gross violation of the First Amendment. So what we found in these documents, they said, was in order to monitor U.S. citizens, we had to fill in the gap with non-governmental entities who they could launder the censorship through. Well, that fill in the gap non-governmental entity was called the Center for Internet Security, which was not only funded by DHS, but none other than Pierre Omidyar himself.
And that's
who
why
over
they're
here is
using
also the
investigators
Intercept funder and founder.
to watch me and follow
and then
me
when you
everywhere.
when you look at this whole network, DHS is one little piece of it. You have CISA, you have Harvard,
Check my
Belfer
phone.
School involved. You have all the big tech companies involved. You have the families like the Murdochs, the Zuckerbergs,
Crapping
the
out my
Omidyars,
computers.
and then you have the AP and news organizations. It's all one
Deleting
systems
videos from my
network.
phone
So
and
out of
from
that
my
systems network,
YouTube.
Clayton, to simply pick out the DHS and
They're
leak
in
it
everything.
itself is an intelligence misdirection operation. And that's what the Intercept did. So when I started, after we spoke, I was speaking to a very good friend of mine, and I said, you know what? It seems like you have the big story, the big iceberg, and somewhere along the process, they have it down to a science. Conceal, then plagiarize, step 2, then misattribute, step 3, prevaricate and lie, hijack the original story, and disseminate a small piece of it. And that is what the Intercept, Fang, and Lippenstein did. I mean, come on. You can just type it in Google and you'll see on Influence Watch that Pierre Omidyar funded the Center for Internet Security, which houses ISAC, which is the clearinghouse for the communications, which we brought up 2 years ago. But if you look today, they amplify their small tip of their iceberg. And this is a misdirection because what it does is in a recurrent process of news dissemination, the public thinks, oh wow, we got the quote unquote truth, let's move on. This process, interestingly, Clayton, I found out recently, is called a limited hangout.
So they have a name for this.
Yes.
Where they release a small piece of information as a misdirection.
Yeah.
They call it a limited hangout. Now, where does this come from? Who
Right,
came up
that's
with
why
where
they
does this
put
term
on
come from?
Encyclopedia Britannica and tell you that contrail. You're looking at a contrail right now, they'll tell you. They do that to all my videos.
I also run
That's why they
company
do
which
it, though.
We do medical research. So I was on a phone call on a scientific research with one of the largest cancer institutions talking about science. At the end of that call, they had seen this news and they said, Dr. Shiva, tell us what's going on. And I told them, there's this very interesting process. One of the guys on the phone call was an MD, PhD in cancer research. He said, you know what? What you just told me is a term called a limited hangout. And I go, what does that mean? He goes, where they release a limited portion of the story, they let it hang out. And this term came out of the Nixon Watergate tapes. Apparently Nixon knew that he was seriously involved in the entire burglary, etc. So him and Haldeman in those tapes are saying, why don't we do a limited hangout? Let the story limited, a small piece of it hang out. And so when I did some research on this, and anyone can find this, a guy called David Brown, and it's out there, he says, there is a term in art and politics and he defines this among intelligence professionals that is known as a limited hangout. Whenever one's veil of secrecy is penetrated, spies or politicians can employ misdirection to distract the public. The technique involves disclosing a self-contained and sensational, relatively benign version of the story to lay out all the cards on the table and assuage concerns that anyone is trying to hide anything. Upon learning the quote-unquote truth, like the DHS leaks as presented, the public is mollified and moves on with no real scrutiny of note, missing the real story altogether. They would acknowledge certain events and withhold others, with the effect of clearing, in this case they talked about Nixon, the president, in this case Pierre Omidyar, of any wrongdoing. It's a classic technique. It's almost like they have a scientific capability, and it's part of the intelligence network. So when I stepped back and looked at it, it's like you just use your rational mind. Here's Pierre Omidyar, who's, by the way, everywhere. He's the one who was involved. Anyone do a little bit of research, and we have it all on winbackfreedom.com. We've documented from other sources. He's involved in the intelligence work over in Ukraine, right? He's involved in putting out fake news over here. He's actually involved in developing technologies like data miner to watch people's behaviors and figure out how to, quote-unquote, intercept these communications. So what does Pierre Omidyar do? He's an intelligence asset, Clayton, when you really put it together. Over here, he funds all these intelligence and media organizations. He funded the Center for Internet Security. And if you look at what he particularly funded was how government, the protocol, would communicate through the NGO, through the ISACs, to the big tech organizations. And we've had it up there for 2 years. Glenn Greenwald, we sent it to him.
Yeah.
The ACLU knew about it. And now they amplify the half-truth. So I have to come to the logical conclusion. Here's Pierre Omidyar. He creates the Intercept for fearless and courageous, aggressive, investigative communication. Over here, he's involved in the censorship network, and Fang and Klippenstein purposefully leave out his name. So our work is the original work that was wholesale plagiarized, wholesale put out there as a part of this limited hangout. And so I think what the public needs to understand is, they'll once know, data miner, this, and this has been going on for a long time before Snowden came out. Anyone in technology knew that the NSA has been involved in spying on all of us. The issue is, how does a news organization release a story in these limited hangouts to assuage the public? And so we move on. But we're not going to let them get away with this time, Clayton, because we did that story. In fact, if you look at my Facebook post, I wrote to the Pulitzer Committee and the Polk Awards Club, because these guys are probably going to try to get a Pulitzer out of this. And we want to cut that off, and we've documented that if they're going to give a Pulitzer, it should go to the person who did it. And I say this without arrogance. We're the ones who busted our butts to do this. We were like day and night. That diagram is another PhD thesis. The important thing is when you study that diagram, it's everyone's involved. Harvard is involved. The Belfer Institute's involved. Stanford is involved. They have created a domestic censorship infrastructure so they can do an end run around the First Amendment. They can launder censorship, and those terms we put out there in 2020. So you have to start wondering, my conclusion of all this is anyone who's leaking these so-called big news and they're getting major news media visibility, they're part of it.
We know it's one. Yes, it is one big censorship party, and they are all part of it. They're all part of this one deep state cabal.
And they have this limited hangout feature now, which is a wonderful part of it, because in a democracy, people like you and I, we will do research. We will, do the hard work. So when the big iceberg of real research comes out, they have this methodology to release a piece of it to mollify the public, but hide the big piece. And that's exactly what the Internet Intercept DHS leaks is about. No one should give them any credit. They plagiarized. They did a limited hangout, period. And in winbackfreedom.com, we've updated the front part of that website, and we've laid it all out so that all the contents from 2 years ago is there, plus our new analysis.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Shiva, keep fighting the good fight, and I wanted to get you on to talk about this latest news plus this limited hangout. So thank you so much for your continued work on this and being a ray of hope against this big government and big data tech censorship. Thank you so much for joining us.
One final point I want to make, Clayton, and I want your audience to know this, that it's more than a ray of hope we have now, because we've built our own independent movement, truthfreedomhealth.com. We had all these independent journalists, others, networks of people. During those 2 years, they got the story out. over 200 million people saw all the content we've done, and that's also documented. And that's only the way out of this, Clayton. We have to build our own independent news and always put it out first and keep it in front facing. So I'm glad you're doing this piece, and you did it before, because we cannot give credit to those people who are doing these limited hangouts. And credit matters because it drives people to understand who are their real leaders. People come bottoms up, not these top-down people who get all the visibility and are actually there to crunch the actual stories and the actual truth. So I appreciate what you're doing.
Well, my pleasure, and I want all of our audiences watching right now. I don't usually ask you to do this, but please, share this story. Just click on the little share button and share it out with a friend. Send it as confuse. It's a brilliant strategy. Absolutely crazy. Well, we've got more news to get to here on the show. If you do subscribe to the channel,
right ahead of Trump. I mean, it makes you wonder about his future.
Katie Tur from MSNBC. I'm going to say Fetterman. I know you might be joking about it. And, you get these chuckles on the set there, but they're all thinking the same thing. They're thinking, okay, I can't on television come out here and necessarily say Fetterman for president, but I'm secretly thinking it. Not me, don't put words in my mouth. I'm saying what MSNBC is thinking, what Democratic donors are thinking. They're thinking, this guy just beat Dr. Oz. The guy that had his own television show for years. Wrote books, hugely famous. He beat Dr. Oz on the Oprah Winfrey Show. He had Trump come into Pennsylvania. And Fetterman...
Well, Oprah did endorse Fetterman, just to be fair.
True, yeah, that is true. But, Trump comes and endorses Dr. Oz in the dark red part of Pennsylvania. Now, when I was covering the election, I was out in Butler County. I'm from Pennsylvania, but when Fox sent me out there to cover the election, I was on election day, I was out in Butler County, and holy smokes. I mean, it was absolutely, there was not a Hillary Clinton sign anywhere to be seen. I mean, you're talking no freaking way are they voting for Hillary Clinton. And in fact, I was at an event where she held an event nearby the night before, and there was no one there before election day. She was in the dark red part of Pennsylvania, and no one was there. It was all Trump. So Trump comes to town. He's out in Lucerne County. He's doing his speeches, or he's out in Latrobe and so forth. And who know? Again, I'm not discounting what went on, what nefarious things may have been at play. That's not my point here. My point is where the money flows, the bullshit goes. So all of these donors that poured money from all across the country into this race specifically to make sure that he's there. Again, it's like having an android candidate. So I'm of the argument that they just want a meat puppet. They just want a cyborg with skin draped over it as their candidate that they can control.
And those guys are always thinking about ROI. That's the number one thing they think about. So they're not investing in these people for nothing.
No, of course, but they just want a puppet. They like they have with Biden. So what they're looking at Biden and saying, here's a guy who can't complete a sentence. Whatever we want in the deep state, he will do. Right? That's exactly what Biden does. Whatever we want in the military-industrial complex and the biopharmaceutical complex, whatever we want, he does.
So people are already saying he was in mental decline before he was elected. This was not new news when he ran for president. And the fact that they pulled all the other, Buttigieg and all the other younger candidates completely out of the race and said, let's make it Biden. I mean, that's somebody's agenda. Because, there's no way that they were just oh, this guy's just completely mentally capable of running for president. Let's put him out because we believe in him and he's going to be, great. No, you're exactly right. It's because they're easy to pull the strings.
Yeah, and early on they were saying, no, Biden, no way. Early on, Democrats were saying, no. And then it became apparent, he's our puppet. He's our guy. He's our puppet. And so we're throwing all of our money and attention and censorship and structure behind this guy so that we can get the job done. And you have the biggest turnout in history, and somehow Biden, and then we see this, and Biden sweeps into the presidency, and they literally have a puppet in the White House that they can control from the top down. And now with Fetterman, they're going to have that in the Senate. and they can start to float this idea that he's going to be their candidate for the presidency. Because who else do Democrats have at this point that they could run? Because I don't think Biden's going to be able to run in 2024. I think that's becoming increasingly apparent. From a stamina perspective, from a cognitive perspective, I don't think there's a chance.
Well, I'll say this: if he does run in 2024, it would probably most likely be against DeSantis, and DeSantis would wipe the floor with this guy.
Yeah, we'll see next week if Trump runs and makes his announcement. That's going to be fascinating.
I guess I was thinking 2028 actually. Even Trump would wipe the floor with Fetterman.
Oh, of course. But who knows? I mean, again, we say that, like on a fair playing field, perhaps. But who knows what sort of deep state money and structures are in place that would make that not even close. I don't know. I'm saying that I believe that Fetterman is the perfect next meat puppet candidate for them. And you start to hear, I want to play that Katie Tur soundbite again if I can, Philip, because you hear like the little bit of chuckles, but they're like, yeah, we see where you're going with this, Katie Tur. Listen.
Fetterman as a nominee at some point for president. I know there's some variables, obviously, but just a few. But I just, what he did in the super red, deep red parts of Pennsylvania, and the way that he ran ahead of Biden, as you were saying, ran ahead of Trump. I mean, it just makes you wonder about his future.
Was that Jen Psaki on the left of that panel?
Yeah. So that's Jen Psaki's first big week. So Jen Psaki's got her new job, and she's like, oh, there's some variables, but she's like, yeah, I see where you're going with this. I think we're going to hear more about this. And of course, the mainstream media has fallen in line with him, right? They sit down, they're like John Fetterman, who bravely overcame a stroke to win the Senate. We sat down with him, and we just want to say, and you hear that on The View and Sonny Holston, you're so brave, you've overcome this, and so that's the fawning media coverage that you'll get. They'll do Time Magazine pieces, they'll do 60-minute pieces with him, and they'll feature him and what he's been able to do, and there'll be more focus when he's in the Senate on stroke cases and money for stroke victims and all of that. It's right out of their playbook. But I just think that they need a meat puppet, and that's exactly what they want with Fetterman. So when I heard that, that's immediately what I thought. They need another Biden that they can absolutely control. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Let us know in the chat what you guys think of this. We have a daily newsletter, which is, you can get at redacted.inc totally for free. It's totally free. We try to put a lot of value in it for you first thing in the morning. We work hard on it, and I hope you enjoy it. But you notice there on the right side of your screen, if you go there, you'll see become a VIP member. If you click that, you can become a Redacted VIP member as well. And that means by the end of the year, our goal is to hit 3,500 Redacted Rebels, VIP Rebels, by the end of the year. And we're closing in on that number so that we, that's how you're able to support independent journalism by becoming a VIP. That's what, for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support what we do here, having the guests that we have on the show, having the staff that we have, and everything that we do to produce this show for you. Again, you don't have to, but if you do have some extra pocket change you'd like to support the show, you can become a Redacted Rebel. That means we give you exclusive content as well, and exclusive live streams. We're going to have a lot more of that coming out very soon because we're putting together a whole new series that we've been working on. It's taken quite a bit of time, but it's going to be rolling out here over the holidays, which we're really excited about. So you'll get to see that first before anybody. We don't have billionaires that are backing us. We don't have Rupert Murdochs and past 1.4 million subscribers, so if you're not subscribed, please do. I never even for a second thought of for voting for Biden ever, not in my wildest dreams, but my sister was out there. She's like, I can't imagine someone would vote for this guy who creeps around little girls and it's like, what a creep. Like early on about this kind of stuff. And my mom doesn't really get political. She plays Words with Friends on her iPad with her, and she likes Dancing with the Stars, and but mom gets it. Mom understands.